look, I'm not saying everybody needs to go own their own business, but if you were just clocking in and clocking out every day, it's really hard to take your family on a trip like that.
Welcome to the Dynamis podcast, where we are all about unlocking a fruitful life, removing your limiting beliefs, and getting to the next level. My name is Tim Garul, and I'm stoked to grow on this journey with you. As David Geffen says, we are each the figment of our own imagination, and some people have the greater ability to imagine than others.
Welcome to the Dynamis podcast this week, guys. We got my bonus dad back in for his second round. We're putting him back in the studio this week. I'm out in Vegas for a little work. Today is podcast recording number 3. And so we're just, I just want to check back in with Ernie. There's been a lot of growth, a lot of change. I get a lot of comments on the interview that I did with you in Laguna. People like it. They like the story. And they like the interaction of like you and I, the legacy of you passing down the knowledge. And so I thought, you know what? Let's just do a regular check-in. So today's kind of a cool day because we're sitting here in your office. This is a huge hurdle. It's a big check mark for you guys. You kind of went out, found an office space, rehabbed it. It's been a long journey, but you're kind of finally getting settled in here into the new office space, which is pretty cool. A yard for your maintenance crews, equipments. You have like a shop, warehouse. You have a big storage area for all your files. Downstairs, you have, the runners and the staff that interacts with tenants that are coming in the leasing department. You got like this upstairs area where kind of more your executive staff. And then you have a whole other side of this building that you can lease out.
Yeah, it's been a journey to get here. And what the interesting part was, years ago, I had always wanted to have my own office building. That was kind of mine. I've been partners in buildings, but not that. So when my sister and I chose to buy this location, and then, of course, after we bought it, we're like, okay, we need to do a remodel. So we went through a whole tenant improvement and all that. Finally, in July, I got that finished off, moved the staff into the area that was complete, and now we got the front area that's for lease. So
yeah, cameras everywhere and monitors, and the upstairs, you got like 3 wine coolers up here, and you have a nice seating area. You can kind of host, and there's a big conference room downstairs. You could host, you could do like a little mastermind. You really could, you have the space downstairs to do like breakout sessions and mastermind rooms. And what's cool is when I first met you, we talked about this on the first episode. You really opened my eyes to a whole new world in a lot of ways, right? You were definitely paramount in leading me to Christ. You definitely opened my eyes. You left a breadcrumb trail of, here's some knowledge, right? Like open the book and look at the world through a new lens. Like open your eyes and you can have whatever you want. But what's really cool is, as our relationship has grown, as I've started to evolve in my journey, in reflection, when I look at you, I'm at an age as an adult now where I can reflect on your years in the past decade and really see your growth as well, And it's kind of cool to be at a spot where, yes, there's this father-son relationship, but also there's this peer-to-peer relationship where I can notice your growth. I can see areas where maybe you're a little weak currently and nod, and nudge you and prod you to, grow a little bit, just like you do to me, like you can see those same areas. It's kind of cool. We've entered a cool season of life. It's
been inspirational actually for me to watch you and your growth and to be able to pour in and then, any feedback back to me. We're both trying to grow, we're trying to be better, and what's exciting is you're also taking hold of whatever personal growth stuff there is, like the books that I would give during Christmas to each of you guys, and you just take hold of it and you're in it, and then you're like, oh, you got to check out this one, and you're giving me resources, and then your good friend Tyrell, right? He just referred one. I'm in the middle of that, compound effect, which has been huge.
What's your takeaways from the compound effect?
Oh man, well, it's all habits, and it's all just little changes. We don't need to make these huge changes. I remember my friend Nando, when I was coaching him, and he wanted to lose some weight. He was drinking 8 Cokes a day, right? He's like, I need to lose weight. I go, okay, I'm just going to have you just drop down. Let's just do 3 a day. And he looked at me and he's like, I can still have it? I said, listen, we're just little notches we're going to take. Yeah. And that's what we took. And that's kind of with compound effect, what I'm getting. It's little just changes, shifts, really, is what it is. How can I shift and make a little change here or there?
I don't remember the study. I'd have to look it up, but there's a really interesting study on implementation of exercise. And essentially they broke down 2 control groups. And, they had a pool of individuals who were overweight, needed to develop an exercise routine. They broke them down and they separated them to 2 groups. And one group was like the rah-rah group, okay? They pumped them up. We're going to get out there. You're going to change your life. You're going to exercise every day. Let's go. And it was like, balls to the wall right out the gate. And at first, that group made a ton of progress, first week, whatever. But then what happened was there was this steep line of attrition. And by the end of the goal, I can't even remember how long the period was. Maybe it was a month or 2 months. I can't remember. I'll have to look up the study. There was only one individual who remained disciplined in the workload every day. And it was just like, a rocket ship, let's go in the workload. And then after the study was over, that individual completely fell off the routine and went all the way back to old habits. In control group 2, the difference is they said, listen, we're going to start really slow and we just want sustainability. So we're going to actually do less. We're not asking you to work out at all. Do you watch TV? Yes. Okay. Can you, in the first week, stand for 30 minutes while you watch TV? Just 30 minutes, just stand. And then that grew into, can you walk in place? Can you jog in place? And then they increased the time loads and they slowly increased the workload. And at the end of that study, almost everybody was still in the program. And then at the end of the study, I think the majority of the individuals were not only continuing to improve, but also increase the workload. And they kept off the weight and kept a higher physical physique. And sometimes when you're making big change like that, it's almost counterintuitive to go too fast. You almost need to do less to go further, right? Do you want to go fast or do you want to go far? Is the common saying, right? You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And, there's this entrepreneur, his name's Alex Hormozy. I've sent you a bunch of his content. He looks at things in these really interesting time models. He talks about, time in decades. He compares the decisions he's making to, he opens the decisions he's making today, and he compares it to like his 80-year-old self giving him feedback, okay? And one of the biggest pieces of advice he has is if you can't do something consistently for a decade, don't even start it. Not even once. Don't even do it one time. It's all about longevity. It's time in the game. If you can't do it for a decade, don't do it once.
Which makes sense. And actually, you were talking about there is the compound effect. They give you a example of the person that wanted to run a marathon, but wasn't doing any of it. And so he had him start walking just a small little, and then just kept increasing that. Yeah. And by the time it was done, they were blown away what they could do. Yeah.
And you just keep on it. Consistency over time.
There's a book, is it Tortoise and the Hare? Is that what it is?
I mean, I know the fable, the story.
Yeah. Where the tortoise, just the longevity, just a little bit, right?
A little bit at a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing if you look at entrepreneurship and there's this, trend line of shiny object, really fast, downward trajectory, really fast up, downward trajectory. And that guy that's doing the boring thing that he's bored of doing, but he's good at doing, and he's making progress, and he's slow and consistent, and he's barely making any altitude. But, you speed up 10 years, you look ahead 10 years, and the guy that's shiny object syndrome, up, down, up, down, up, down. Well, eventually that guy never made it past, this ceiling of altitude where that guy going real slow, not making any progress. Holy cow. And then all of a sudden it turns into an L-shaped trajectory just straight up, There's something about the consistency and longevity. Everything you want to think in really long time horizons.
Well, if you take and you look at Dave Ramsey talks about it, if you're going to invest in a 401k or you're going to invest in any IRA, if you look at the ones that don't put any money in or just sporadically put in, but the person that puts in something early on and they're just consistently, they're worth 10 times more than the other one.
You know who the top performers are in invested funds, in managed assets? So like wealth advisors, they do studies like which of our clients are doing the best in the market and why. Do you know who the top performing clients were?
Just the consistent ones, right?
Dead clients.
The dead, because they were...
The systems that they have in place, they're just continuing to compound and work over time. It's the people that are emotional in the market. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to take my money out. Now I'm going to put it back in, take it out, put it in. The dead clients have a better performance in the market. And what does that tell us? Like, okay, it's time in the market and it's compounding and it's consistency in the discipline and just doing the boring, thing every day, over and over and over and over. And you look up 10, 20, 30 years and your life is different. But it's not sexy. It's not exciting to do the boring thing every day.
But if you talk about shiny objects, that's also immediate gratification.
Totally.
That's what it is. We're going to just do this now. I want to get that car and make payments. No, wait till you have the cash. Yeah. And many people in the society, that's why there's not many that are not paycheck to paycheck these days.
Why do you think that is? Like, where do you think, what's the disconnect there?
Well, I just think it's immediate gratification too. I mean, back in the day, you remember, if I go back to my grandparents and my parents, they did layaways. So you put the money away before you even got the thing. Now you got these credit cards, you just throw it on the credit card.
Is that how layaway works?
That's how it worked.
I didn't know that.
You'd put it away until you had the thing fully paid for, and then you would get whatever it is that you were getting.
I thought layaway was like they would send you the object, and so layaway was like a savings plan for the object.
Yeah, but you wouldn't get it.
Okay, wasn't there a stigma for layaway? Like it was embarrassing to do layaway?
But if you think about it, it's smart. Right now, we're just credit card, boom, I can just get this.
I never knew that.
That's my understanding. So,
well, have you noticed, like when you buy something on Amazon or flights, even you go on book a plane flight or a ticket to a game, it's like, it's $100 or 8 payments of 15, 25 or something like that. That's crazy.
And then they don't tell you the interest. You start paying the interest, and it's insane. If you start, even like mortgages, I didn't understand it until I got my mortgage lending license. And once I went to the class, and I'm realizing, hey, okay, so if I get a 5% mortgage on a 30-year, the only way I'm getting 5% is paying over 30 years, right? And majority of people refinance in 5 to 6 years. So if I'm refinancing, they upfront load all the interest. I'm paying closer to 30%. I don't know the number, but it's way more than 5%.
Yeah, when you really look at the front portion of that mortgage and how much interest is front loaded in the first 7 years, it's crazy. I mean, you're barely touching principal in the first 7 years. Now, I will counter that and say, yes, the interest is front loaded, but the other side of that coin is the bank is fronting 95 to 97% of the cash for you to have a home that's also appreciating in value. And yes, you are paying interest, but it's also appreciating, and you gain from that appreciation. Where the difference is made is, how often are you refinancing and restarting that interest schedule? How are you using the equity in that home? Are you using it to reinvest, or are you pulling it to go buy a car or whatever? But the bank does carry, they're carrying the majority of that risk. It's crazy,
I mean, if you look at it and you say, okay, well, if I'm going to do a 30-year, my payments are lower, so I'm going to have more money a month.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you do with that more money a month. You're going to go reinvest it?
Right.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
Most people don't. Majority of people don't, right? They just take it and they go spend it. Oh, I can do more whatever shiny object stuff.
Yeah. I think there's been this big push societally for passive income. And you drilled that into me years ago, and I'm holy cow, so thankful that you did. But the way I'm looking at passive income now is starting to shift. Passive income is the ultimate goal, right? That's what I want. I want all my income eventually to be passive. But I used to see it as like, this is all I need to focus on right now, is I just need to barely have enough to go buy this thing. And then, this thing is barely spitting off $100 a month or $200 a month. But the way I see it now is I'm starting to reshift and retrain my brain around this is I'm putting less focus on the passive assets right now. And I'm putting more focus on building a nasty vertical income, just as much vertical income to where I have an income and tax problem. And then what I do is go buy real estate to offset the tax problem and then forget about it. It's not for money right now. It's not for, I'm not living off of any of that passive income. And then you look up a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades from now, and that passive income is a money snowball. It's just compounding. So right now, it's interesting because the first part of my investing journey was really heavily focused on how do I build these passive income assets? And maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but now my focus is on, okay, how do I build as steep of vertical income as I can on the front end, and then have a capital problem that I need to displace with real estate,
I would tell someone younger, have the loan, get the house, and get a smaller house when you first start out. Yeah. And then rent that out, and then get a bigger house. A lot of people want, I'm going to do my dream house, and I'm going to do this. I'm like, no, you gotta take your time. So I think it depends on where you're at in the cycle as well, and how you're playing the game. Yeah. But yeah, it does make sense. As much cash flow as you can get, and then you put it all into real estate. But not many people are disciplined like you are with that.
Yeah, I would say the majority, I still love real estate for sure. The further I get into the journey, the more my eyes are being open to, other vehicles. And when you look at like who's the most successful, and I guess how do you measure success? But monetarily, let's just say fiscally, when you look at people who's bringing home the bacon, well, yeah, they own real estate, but all of them have businesses that just spit off a ton of cash flow. First of all, I think we can agree that you're never going to get wealthy working for somebody, saving your money and putting it in the bank. You can be comfortable. You can earn a good retirement. There's a ceiling that you can't break above. You can't take, 1 + 1 and it equals a billion. There's no exponentially compounding effect from getting plugged into the system, getting your paycheck every month, putting it in your 401k that earns 5 or 6% a year. You do have to take a risk and break out of that. And the reward that you get for taking that risk is obviously it could go really well or it could go really bad. But it seems that, the biggest producers, they own businesses that then they buy real estate to offset the, tax liability.
And they're taking the highest risks.
Totally.
So people that won't take any risks, they just stay at a certain thing. And if they're spending their money on shiny objects or just frivolous stuff, and they're not taking it and reinvesting it. Like if you're working for someone, okay, but still live lean. You get a raise. Don't go up what your monthly expenses are. Take that, invest it, and do that. I mean, I think you can get ahead, but I think there has to be an ultimate goal where you're going. And some people don't want to work for themselves. There's a lot of responsibility.
That is true, but the further, like in my situation, I got fired, right? And I was building some passive income streams, but now, at first that was like the scariest thing in the world. Now what I think, like what scares me the most? What scares me the most is going back to a job that pays me a income that I can't make any more money than what I'm making. And if something goes wrong financially, I'm in big trouble. I have no ability to just make more capital, Like, what if I get hurt? What if to me, it seems more risky.
Because if you got hurt, what happens there? And then you're in the control of whoever the employer is.
Yeah.
Like you were in your situation. Yeah. So you're in control of that. And
their values and beliefs.
Yes.
Right, wrong, indifferent, true, false.
I mean, to have the liberty to be able to have funds coming in, like where I'm sitting, where I can choose where I want to put my time. My time's more important than any money. Yeah. And because of the hard work and the time I put in, now I'm sitting in a little different position. I'd much rather have that than working for someone else and being a slave to them.
Yeah, I think it's important though, for people just starting out to put realistic timelines and expectations on yourself, because on the front end of that, you're going to have to trade a lot of time, more time than you would trade going to work and clocking in. Far more time.
Agreed. I would be up at 3 a.m. times. I would get up early. I'd go to the gym, 3 a.m. gym, and I'd be in at 4. And so I'd be there until, at least 5 at night. And then I remember I had a second gig where I was flipping home separately, and I'd be there till 8 o'clock. There was a season that I had to give up to where, okay, I'm gonna hunker down and I'm just gonna work and I'm gonna do this. Yeah. The key, I think, in that is to keep it a season, because our family's important and it's important for us to have time. I grew up with a workaholic dad, basically. He worked all the time. And then we would go on some trips, and then that's the most time I would spend with him. But it was tough because was he
son, engaged in those trips, or was he kind of checked out? On
all the trips I would go with my dad, he would be engaged, but I always noticed the day before we were leaving.
Oh, to come back home?
To come back home, you could see him kind of disengage and start worrying about, and it was different back then.
Yeah, I mean, household roles were different.
All his stuff's waiting on the desk when he came back, and he was slammed with stuff to do. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But now, working remote, I mean, that gives me more liberty to be off at different locations and still work. And I'm usually working. People goes, oh, you're not at work. Do you ever work? I'm like, yeah, I work pretty much wherever I'm at. So I'm still doing stuff even though I'm not here.
Blessing and a curse. We just got back from an epic family Hawaii trip, and dude, that was amazing. I left for 2 weeks and went to Hawaii with my young kids. We went on adventures, but you know what I was doing at 5 o'clock in the morning? I was working, and at night answering emails, and like sometimes in the middle of an adventure day, and this is the trade-off, is like, and eventually, I aspire to get to a place to where I have systems in place to where I don't have to check in on a 2-week, vacation. But Yeah, I was in Hawaii snorkeling and scuba diving and playing with my kids on the beach. And in exchange, I had to get on my computer intermittently. What a blessing it also was, where I could take my work in a backpack, like the freedom of movement and mobility.
I was in Bear Lake, and I remember we had some friends up, and I would always take my morning and I would carve out an hour to 2 hours, and I would just handle my emails. I would just do all my stuff, and then boom, okay, then I would unplug and be present with them.
Yeah.
And one of them commented and said, man, I like how you can make sure you discipline yourself and handle that, and then unplug, and then you're with us. And I was like, oh, that's important. But it's not easy,
No.
Especially because I have that same mentality as my dad, where I could become a workaholic, and I was at one point, but I could be very easily workaholic and just work.
You're right. It's not easy, but it's important. When I first got fired, I went into survival mode, straight up scarcity. I've expressed this to you, but I went way too far because I felt like, oh no, I'm drowning. My kids, they're depending on me, and I traded all my time. Now, was it necessary in that phase? I think it was, but psychologically that was super hard. And although I'm still in a hustle phase, I definitely have toned it back. I asked my son the other day, sometimes I just like check in with the kids, like, hey, do you think of me as like being around, or am I working all the time? And he said, well, it used to be you were working all the time, but he's like, but in the evenings now, like you're definitely like after a certain time, like when you pick me up from school and I come home, he's like, you're around, like at dinner, or, I'm taking him sports practice. And so that made me happy, because that was, a goal for me is my kids aren't going to remember what I brought home. They're going to remember if I worked late, if I was around, if I listened to them, if I was present, so.
And these times are important. So if you look back 0 to 8 years old, our programming, I think it's like 70% of our programming or 80% of our programming is done as a child. And then from 8 forward to 18, then there's the rest of it. So it's super important when they're younger.
Let's talk about Hawaii for a minute. Now, since we're on that was a bucket list for you.
That was a bucket list.
How many people did you take? It was our whole family.
It was 19 of us.
That's all the kids. So 4 kids, however many grandkids that is. How many is that? How many grandkids is that?
Well, 10 grandkids.
10 grandkids, yeah. That were there on the trip.
9. So I want to acknowledge baby Lincoln. He's
right,
counted
Lincoln.
in that 10 because he's our grandkid. So he's our angel baby. But right. So 9 of us total. The grandkids.
Right. You wanted that for a long time. That was something you wanted to do, is take your whole family.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it like a couple of years ago. Okay, we're going to do Hawaii, and we're going to do it then. Now we have the cabin we do every Christmas. Every other Christmas we go up and we do that. And for me, it's important to get us all together and enjoy each other and the grandkids to enjoy their cousins and stuff. Because other than that, if you're not intentional to do those things, in my experience, it doesn't happen. So you got to get it on the books, get it on the calendar, and it was a pretty epic trip.
I mean, dude, taking 19 people to Hawaii, you had 3, huge. These units were like 1,200 square foot, right on the beach. That takes incredible resources to be able to. First of all, that's a huge gift. It's a huge blessing that you could provide that gift, and it just goes back to the level of risk. Look, I'm not saying everybody needs to go own their own business, but if you were just clocking in and clocking out every day, it's really hard to take your family on a trip like that.
As an entrepreneur, if I didn't take time early on to put in those seasons where I worked a lot and sacrificed, if I didn't do that, and I didn't take and limit some of the shiny object to go towards funds, and I put it into investments that could create a return, that might not have been possible.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important when we're planning to be able to plan, and do I want the freedom, and do I want to create these experiences? To me, the experiences are what you take home. I've sat in I don't know how many funerals, and I've watched the slideshows. You don't see them at work often. I don't see people at work on the slideshows. They're usually with their family or friends, either at the lake or the mountains or just on a trip somewhere. They're doing something. Yeah. Those are the ones in a slideshow, and that's the part of my dash that I want to make sure that I make as fruitful as possible for me and anybody around me.
Yeah, you're right. And time is finite and fleeting. You want to take advantage of that.
That's why Bear Lake's been one where it's I just love the mountains. I love being up there. And it's not the cabin or that's important to me. What's important to me is what happens there. And when I can bring friends or family up and I can be unplugged and disconnected, and there's something about being there where we can have that relational time where if they came here and I had work, it's just not as intentional as it is there. And so that's the why behind having that location for the family.
I want to talk, so back in the season of Hustle, and I think this is where we'll take the episode because it's an interesting thing, and I don't know if a lot of people know about it. But back in your season of Hustle, you were involved in a project here locally in Las Vegas. And first of all, if you haven't listened to the interview I did with Ernie, the first time, it lays a lot of groundwork on your lineage in Vegas. You know, you are Vegas. You're one of the original developing families in Las Vegas, and your family's had a huge impact here. You guys have contributed a lot, built a lot. You know, your history is interwoven with Las Vegas. And so if you're wondering like, okay, who's this guy? Ernie's my bonus dad, and he is, you know, a fifth generation legacy Las Vegas family member. And so there's a lot of cool history there. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first episode. But a story that you tell me all the time, and it's just so creative because it just speaks to your problem solving ability, your ingenuity, you know, but also your philanthropy, is you did a project with the Ronald McDonald House. What year was that?
I'd say that was about 1996 is when we started construction, I think around then.
And why I want to cover this story. Well, first of all, if you don't know about Ronald McDonald Houses, it's a great organization. It provides essentially housing for people who, you know, their children are sick. They need a place to stay. It's near a hospital. It's usually, you know, furnished and catered. And so it just gives people a safe place, a reprieve, you know, a place to go when they're dealing with some hardship. They don't have to think about grocery shopping. All they have to do is be present and focused and be there with their family. And they came to you back in 97 or whenever it was.
It was actually before that. So about 10 years before, they were trying to build a house here in Las Vegas. They came to my dad, and I think it was 96, around that time. And they just said, hey, we got some property. We've been trying to get off the ground. We haven't been get off the ground. Would you partner with us? Would you support and help us? And I remember my dad saying, yeah, but you got to give me control over to run with it. And they did. And so through that, you know, he brought me in and involved in the board meetings and getting involved on the construction side because I was running a lot of the construction stuff. He said, okay, what we're going to do, he laid out a plan, and we went into the community. And first off, before I even start with that, I want to say that my grandfather was huge. You give back to the community. You know, he instilled that into us and, of course, his sons. And you give back. So I remember back, my grandfather would buy these big plots of land, and when he would develop them, he'd carve out an area for a park and he'd give it to the city, or a library and give it to the city. So I always remember those things he did. And then, of course, he'd give to he was very big in sports, so he'd give to the Football Foundation and those things. And then, of course, when they named the school here, Ernest A. Becker Senior Middle School here in Las Vegas, he would show up every time they had their events, and he would just be present. They made a rose garden for him. He loved going in the garden. So he was a model for, of course, I'm sure his sons, but especially for me. And then my father, the same. I mean, he was I think he was on the school board. He was on the athletic director, you know, as part of the not the athletic director, but he gave to the university, my grandfather and them. I remember we presented a check for the university down there. So I just, you know, first, before I get further into Ronald McDonald House, just want to lay some groundwork that I was taught. You give back to the community, you support the community. The community, of course, is giving you so much for your, you know, you're doing business and you're profiting from stuff. So it's always give back.
Which, by the way, we drove by a middle school today. You know, you and I met a guy for breakfast this morning, and we're driving there, and we're talking in the car, and I just look over and I'm like, holy crap, Ernest A. Becker Senior Middle School. And I looked at you and I said, how does that feel? Mm-hmm. You're driving past a middle school that's named after your family legacy. That's got to be crazy.
You know, it's crazy. And I remember from the story that I understand, one of the reasons that got named is when Jerry Tarkanian was here, you know, the coach for the Rebels and stuff. Our family was really big on all the sports and UNLV and helping wherever we could. And Lois Tarkanian was one of the ones that really pushed to get the school named after my grandfather because he was so impactful to them in the community. And you ask, how's it make me feel? It makes me feel proud. I mean, I look at the history of my dad and my granddad, you know, what my granddad did here and what he just followed. He was an entrepreneur. He followed and he did. And he learned that from his dad and his grandfather. So it's generational down. And so, you know, I look at that and I'm just like, man, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know?
It is.
That's a lot of work. You know, he did a lot of work in the community. I mean, there was president of the Home Builder Association. There was a lot of sacrifices he took of his time to give back and to pour into the community and stuff. So
that's a good foundation of, okay, you are always trained, programmed, you know, led to give back to the community. So Ronald McDonald House approaches your dad. Can you help us with this project? He's like, yeah, absolutely. I want control. Brings you into these board meetings to figure out how to get it done. Tell the story from here because it's really, really cool what you guys ended up doing.
And matter of fact, I share with other charities when they're looking to build the story and they're just like, whoa, they haven't heard of it that way. So it was going to cost $3.2 million to build. So what we did is we went out we formed a committee that would actually go for fundraising, and we looked and said, okay, we put a full list together through the whole community on names, and we said, okay, who's going to take this block of names? Who's going to take this? And so part of that was we were going to reach out. We reached out to a lot of the community members to do that. The other piece of that, which is a huge piece, is the construction. So typically when you build a house, you have 15 subcontractors. So I have one framer, I have one concrete guy, and so on and so forth. So if you go down it, what we did is we said, no, we're going to do something a little different here. We're going to get 10 framers. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the first framer donate 100% of their time, and they're going to plate it.
Explain to the audience, maybe the audience doesn't have a construction background. Okay. So you would have had to pay these subcontractors for each portion of the work, which put you, what resources did you have, right? You're trying to do this as a not-for-profit, which means, it's a donation. So you have to either convince people to come in and donate the entire scope of work, which they're probably unwilling to do, or you have to go raise the money to get this done. So instead of one framer coming in, you found 10 separate framers.
Yeah, so if I just talk about that one trade, typically we'd hire a framer. They would handle all the lumber. They'd handle all the labor and everything. So if I just talk about labor only for that one trade, so we have 10 different contractors. Now they can offer to help and just donate their time. So the first part, when you're building a house, you need to, after you get the concrete and everything done, you're going to plate it. So you put the boards around the bottom, and then the next person would come in and frame the walls. Next one would do the trusses or the floor joists. Then the next one would start on the net. So each one of them donated fully their time.
Yeah.
Coordinating, because you got to think about it. Then we had to go to every lumber company and truss company and have them donate parts of all of the package. Yeah. So to coordinate this whole thing was a huge feat.
Yeah, so you have, one crew that pours and finishes the concrete, the next crew that comes out and chalks where the plates are going to go, the next crew. What I'm, wondering, and I've dealt, if you've never dealt with GCs or subcontractors, every subcontractor, I feel like, just complains about the previous subcontractor's work. Like, this guy's work, if you would have called me for the first part, like, look, this isn't square. How did you deal with that? It had to be with if you're telling me instead of having one framer, you had 10 framers come in and do a single portion of the framing. How did you deal with, just the nightmare of everybody complaining about the last person's work?
It's not about you. It's not about the other person. It's about those kids sitting in the hospital.
Yeah.
And the parents that are sitting here struggling because their kid may die. It's about the kids.
Yeah.
And their survival. And supporting the parents. So when we can get out of ourselves and we can say, okay, how are we going to support someone else? To me, that's the key. And that's how we dealt with it. Matter of fact, I remember one of the guys that worked for us, it was a super, his name was Val. And I remember he came out and he was running, it was when the drywall crews were coming. So we had a drywall crew. We had non-union and union come.
Union crews will pack up all of their tools and leave the job site if you allow non-union crews on a union job.
So they showed up and there's like, we're not going in there. And I remember Val said to him, they said, hey, number one, this is for the kids. This is the kids, number one. And what I'm gonna do to support you in this is I'm gonna put you on an entirely different floor. You handle this floor, your non-union's going on this floor, and you guys will stay separate. But this is for the kids. And I remember him drilling that home to them. And you know, sometimes we get our personal stuff in the middle of this, and it's about us. And until we can pull out of that, no, it's about the community and the kids. And we're providing this house for the community to have something for, you know, the families. And oftentimes there was a few where there was an accident that was closer. The people didn't even live in Vegas. And I think it was the kid and the father were in life-threatening and they were in the hospital. Well, their family, we were able to bring the family here and have a place for them to stay. Yeah. So construction-wise, you know, we have 300 plus contractors. Matter of fact, if you go to the house, there's a book on the wall. There's actually, you can open it up and look at every contractor that donated. So and then we completed that. At the end of the day, it cost $3.2 million to build. We raised $2.8 through all the construction and all the other. So
where'd the rest of the funds come from?
Other organizations donate, and you got the hotels, you got certain longtime families here that would donate. And matter of fact, I think they they went way far and above the 3.2 because then we were able to do endowment fund and some things and set those up for future, which is huge.
It's just such a creative way to solve. I mean, how did you guys even think to do that?
It was my dad. I'll tell you, he's like, we're going to do this and that. You got to let me have the reins. I'm going to run with it. And he does. And that is one thing that I learned from my dad. You get in and you roll up the sleeves and you figure out a way to do it.
I mean, that is just so creative. So creative.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And after it was built, what was really cool is I would get a group of people together and we'd go and we'd cook dinner for the families. And we'd sit with them, cook it, and then we'd sit with them and eat and be able to talk and converse with them. And I mean, talk about touching your heart and impacting the community. Because now other people are doing that. They do that. They go and serve and cook. So
yeah, really creative. And it really forces you to think abstractly. You know, when I think about that story all the time, and you tell it a lot, and you should. It's a cool story, and people want to hear it. When we're facing a problem that's big, seems insurmountable, how do we look outside of ourselves, and how do we collectively come together to solve this problem? And if we apply that type of creativity and that mindset to other things in our society today, how much could we accomplish? You know, that's freaking cool. It's an inspirational story.
It's huge. It's how do we help others and how do we uplift that? And we give in other ways and serve in other ways. And I'm passionate about helping others, helping those. My granddad was always big on the underdog, helping the underdog. And so I think I got some of that in me, that I'm just so passionate about how can we help and support. You look at this country and we got people that are starving, don't have food. I'm like, really, this country? I'm part of Hope for the City, which was launched, when COVID hit. And I think through Hope for the City, they've given out, I want to say probably close to 50 million pounds of food and just impacting people tremendously. We've got food banks constantly. And the goal of Mike that kind of leads that, he says that no child should go hungry at all. And so his mission is to, through this, we're going to try to nip that so they don't. And so, I'm passionate about helping kids and supporting families and, how can we make a difference?
And that is a problem solved through ingenuity and entrepreneurship. That is definitely not a problem solved through government. I mean, we just see the gluttonous waste, with our tax dollars. So...
Yeah, and I think you're entrepreneurs, and I think this is, I think a challenge for entrepreneurs and business owners is to step up in that, Yeah. I mean, we went to the GoBundance event a year ago, and I remember one of the questions was, the guy I got partnered up with on one of the things we were talking about, and he was like, he was really big at giving back and giving. And he says, I don't think anybody really. Well, then he got teamed up with me, and I'm pretty big on that. So we were like, whoa. And then we got in another group, and they are. So we were amazed at how many people did. But then there are people out there that don't. I mean, even when we did Ronald McDonald House, there's people that companies that didn't give back. And I think through Ronald McDonald House, it sparked them to start, giving to the community, which was, for me, was enlightening, because here we are, we're impacting.
To use the metaphor of the Dead Sea, if you give and if you only take and never give, you die, right? So nothing is alive in that sea. It's like the salinity, the acidity, nothing can survive. And the Dead Sea just takes and takes and takes, and it never gives, right? The body of water, to be healthy and flourishing, you need to give, and you need to receive and give, receive and give, receive and give. You've trained that into me early. You put that into my brain, and I did it. I made a system automatically now, where I get any income that comes in, it automatically separates a percent of my income right into a giving account. And I just watch that account grow all year. And actually we're hitting that time of year where it's about to all get transferred out of my account. So
yeah, I just did mine this last week, because I don't just get a steady paycheck, you get distribution, certain things. So I don't know, okay, what is it going to end at the end of the year? So I'm like, okay. So, cause I always put aside, every check I get, and then it builds up, and I'm like, okay, it's going out to here and here.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's exciting to do those.
It is. Yeah. It is. Well, you and I, we are going to dinner tonight. Yeah. Actually, we better wrap up before my mother murders us for being late. We're going to the Vegas Country Club.
Las Vegas Country Club. Old-time club here in town.
Old country club, old stories, old money, where the mobsters used to hang out. You were telling me that, what's that movie, The Casino?
Oh yeah, Casino, where the plane, the FBI plane was circling the house, and it ran out of gas, and then it ended up in the pond out there on the golf course.
Yeah.
And my mom was saying, well, we were out there on the golf course when that plane ran out of gas and landed. And I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
That is crazy. But that's where we're going. And we better get out of here before my mom kills us.
For sure.
Hope you guys out there listening, I hope this is fun for you to kind of listen into our conversations. We're just recording a conversation that him and I would just be having, catching up. I came to town, we're catching up. We just put a microphone in the middle of it as a conduit and giving it to you guys. So hopefully you got some value out of it too. And appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you on the flip side. See y'all next week.